You're not being ignored because people don't care. You're being ignored because you've trained people to stop listening. And the hardest part, you don't even realize you're doing it. Every time you over-explain, every time you rush to fill the silence, every time you keep talking just a little longer, hoping they'll finally understand. You send a signal, a quiet one, but a powerful one. My words don't need to be valued. And people pick up on that faster than you think. Think about the last time you were in a conversation that actually mattered. A meeting, a moment with someone important, a chance to finally say what you've been holding in. You started speaking carefully, thoughtfully, trying to get it right. At first, they listened. Then something shifted. Their eyes moved. Someone glanced at their phone. Another person leaned back, waiting for you to finish. And then it happened. You were interrupted mid-sentence, or worse. Someone said, yeah, I get it. And just like that, the energy dropped. That quiet, uncomfortable moment where you realize you lost the room. Not because your idea wasn't good, but because your presence wasn't strong enough to hold it. I remember a friend of mine who worked as a product manager in San Francisco. Smart, prepared, always one step ahead. The kind of person you'd expect people to listen to without question. But in every meeting, the same pattern repeated. He would start speaking, laying out his ideas clearly. For a few seconds, everyone paid attention. Then someone would jump in, another voice would overlap. And before he could finish, the conversation moved on without him. There was one meeting he never forgot. He had spent days preparing for it. This was his moment to lead, to show his thinking, to finally be taken seriously. He started strong, but 5 minutes in, someone cut him off. Another person took over the discussion, and no one brought his idea back. He sat there, still in the room, but no longer part of it. That night he told me something I'll never forget. It felt like I was talking, but I wasn't really there. That line hits harder than most people expect, because that's exactly what happens when your words don't carry weight. You speak, but you don't land. A week later, something changed. Not his intelligence, not his ideas, his behavior. He stopped trying to explain everything. He stopped filling every gap in the conversation. He stopped chasing attention. Instead, he said less. One clear point. Then he paused. And what happened next surprised even him. People didn't interrupt. They didn't rush ahead. They didn't check out. They waited. For the first time, the silence worked for him, not against him. And that's when he realized something most people never understand. Being heard is not about how much you say. It's about how much control you have when you say it. In the next hour, you're going to learn how to stop chasing attention and start commanding it. Not by becoming louder, not by becoming more aggressive, but by becoming someone whose words carry weight the moment they're spoken. Someone people don't interrupt, don't ignore, don't forget. So if you've ever felt overlooked, talked over, or quietly dismissed, this is for you. And if you know someone who keeps trying, keeps speaking, but still feels unheard, share this video with them. Because this might be the moment that changes how they show up in every room for the rest of their life. Chapter 1. You lose the room. Before you realize it, you don't lose attention at the end of your sentence. You lose it in the middle. And by the time you notice, it's already gone. Most people think they're being ignored because others are distracted, impatient, or rude. But the truth is harder than that. People don't stop listening because they don't care. They stop listening because they already know you won't stop talking. And once that happens, they stop waiting for your point. They start waiting for your ending. There's a difference. One keeps people engaged. The other pushes them out. Think about how many times you felt that shift. You're speaking. You're explaining something that matters to you. At first, you have the room, eyes on you, heads nodding. Then, slowly, something changes. It's small. Someone leans back. Someone glances at their phone. Someone interrupts with, "Yeah, I get it." And just like that, you feel it slipping. You try to fix it. You add more detail. You explain it better. You keep going just a little longer, hoping to bring them back. But that's the moment everything breaks. Because the more you try to hold attention with more words, the faster it disappears. I watched this happen to someone I worked with years ago. His name was Daniel. Daniel was sharp, not loud, not flashy, but thoughtful in a way that made you trust him. He was the kind of person who always came prepared, the kind of person who cared enough to get things right. But every time he spoke in meetings, the same pattern played out. He would start strong, clear idea, structured thinking. You could tell he knew what he was talking about, and for a few seconds, everyone listened. Then came the second sentence, then the third. Then the explanation behind the explanation. That's when the room shifted. Not dramatically. No one said anything directly. But the energy changed. People stopped reacting. They started waiting for him to finish, waiting for a gap, waiting for a moment to move on. And Daniel, sensing that shift, did what most people do. He tried harder. He added more context, more reasoning, more justification, just to make sure everyone understood. But here's what he didn't realize. They already understood. They just didn't need more. And the longer he spoke, the less valuable each word felt. Until one meeting, everything collapsed at once. It was an important one. Senior leadership. High stakes. The kind of room where being heard actually changes things. Daniel had prepared for days. He started speaking. Confident, focused, ready. For a moment, it worked. People listened. Then, 2 minutes in, someone interrupted. "Yeah, I think we get the idea." Another voice jumped in immediately. "Why don't we just simplify it and move forward?" And just like that, it was over. No one asked him to continue. No one brought his point back. The conversation moved on like he had never spoken at all. Daniel sat there, still in the room, but no longer part of it. That's a different kind of silence. Not the kind you choose, the kind that's given to you. After the meeting, he didn't say much, but later that night he said something that stuck with me. "It's like I disappear when I talk too long," and that's exactly what was happening. Not because he lacked intelligence, not because his ideas weren't strong, but because he had become predictable. This is the part most people never understand. Attention is not controlled by how much value you give. It's controlled by how much tension you create. And tension disappears the moment people can predict you. The moment they know you're going to keep talking, they stop listening before you're done. Not out of disrespect, out of efficiency. Their brain moves on. They've already decided there's nothing new coming. So they check out, and here's where it gets worse. When you feel that happening, your instinct is to do more. More explanation, more clarity, more effort. But that doesn't fix the problem. It proves it. Because now you're not just predictable. You're confirming it. People don't interrupt you because they're rude. They interrupt you because they've learned you won't stop. That's the uncomfortable truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Daniel didn't see it right away. But a few weeks later, something changed. Not because someone coached him, not because he read a book, because he got tired of disappearing. In another meeting, he was asked for his input again. Same room, same pressure. But this time, he did something different. He made one point. Clear, direct, no build-up. And then, he stopped. No second sentence. No explanation behind the explanation. No rush to fill the silence. Just a pause. At first, it felt wrong. You could see it on his face. That instinct to keep going, to fill the gap. But he didn't. He let the silence sit. And something shifted. No one interrupted. No one moved on. The room stayed with him. Not because he said more, because he didn't. Someone leaned forward. "Can you expand on that?" Another voice followed. "Wait, that's actually interesting. What made you think that?" For the first time, Daniel wasn't chasing attention. He was holding it. And the shift wasn't in what he said. It was in what he didn't say. That's the part most people resist. Stopping early feels like losing control. But in reality, it's the only way to keep it. Because when you don't give everything away, people stay engaged. They fill the space. They ask questions. They lean in. Your words don't just pass through them. They land. So here's something simple but difficult. The next time you speak, notice the moment where you feel the urge to add just one more sentence. That extra clarification, that final detail, that just to be sure. Stop there. Don't say it. Let the silence exist. Let it feel slightly uncomfortable. Because that discomfort, that's where attention lives. And once you learn to stay in that space, you don't just speak differently. You become someone people can't ignore. Chapter 2. Calm is not who you are. It's what you practice. Most people think calm is a personality, something you're born with, or not. You either have it or you don't. That's what it looks like from the outside. You see someone in a tense moment, a meeting getting heated, a conversation turning sharp, a situation where most people start reacting. And there's always that one person. They don't raise their voice. They don't rush. They don't defend themselves immediately. They just sit there. Still. Present, controlled. And somehow, the entire room adjusts to them. People listen differently, speak more carefully, even slow down. It feels like power. So we assume it must be natural. But it's not. Calm is not who you are. It's what you practice, and most people never practice it. They wait until pressure hits, until emotions rise, until tension builds. And only then do they try to stay calm. But by that point, it's already too late. Because in high-pressure moments, you don't rise to the level of your intention. You fall to the level of your training. And if you've never trained yourself to stay composed, your reactions take over. I learned this the hard way. A few years ago, I was in a conversation that should have been simple. A colleague challenged something I said. Not aggressively, not disrespectfully, just directly. And for some reason, it hit me harder than it should have. I felt that surge. You know the one. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your mind starts building arguments before the other person even finishes speaking. I interrupted. I pushed back. I explained, quickly, intensely, trying to prove my point before I lost ground. And for a moment, it felt like I was winning. I had more points, more words, more energy. But then I noticed something. The room didn't feel like it was on my side. It felt closed. People weren't leaning in. They weren't engaging. They were watching, not listening to what I said, watching how I said it. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't in control anymore. Not of the conversation, not of the room, not even of myself. After that meeting, someone I respected pulled me aside. He didn't criticize my argument. He didn't say I was wrong. He said something much simpler. "You were right, but you didn't feel right to listen to." That stayed with me, because it exposed something most people miss. People don't respond to your words first. They respond to your state. If your energy feels reactive, your words feel unstable. If your tone feels tense, your message feels weaker, no matter how logical it is. That's why calm matters. Not because it sounds nice, but because it signals control, and control creates authority. But here's the twist most people don't expect. Calm is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of control inside emotion. You still feel the reaction, the tension, the frustration, the urge to respond immediately. that doesn't go away. What changes is what you do next. Most people feel to react. Powerful communicators feel to pause, to choose. That pause? It's everything. But it doesn't appear when you need it. It appears when you've trained it. I saw this clearly in someone I used to work with. Her name was Lisa. She wasn't the loudest person in the room. She wasn't the most dominant. But when things got tense, something shifted. People looked at her, not because she spoke first, but because she spoke last. In one meeting, a disagreement started building. Two people went back and forth, voices slightly raised, energy rising. You could feel the room tightening. Most people either jumped in or checked out. Lisa did neither. She just listened. No interruption, no visible reaction. And when the room finally paused, when the energy had nowhere else to go, she spoke. One sentence. Calm, steady, clear. Let's separate what we know from what we're assuming. That was it. No long explanation, no emotional tone, and something changed instantly. The conversation slowed down. People reset. The tension dropped. Not because she said something complex, but because she said it from control. That's the part people underestimate. Calm doesn't just affect you. It regulates everyone around you. Because when you don't react, you interrupt the pattern, you break the cycle of escalation, and in that break, you take control. But most people never experience that, because they don't allow the pause. They feel something and immediately try to resolve it, fill it, fix it, respond to it. They treat every emotion like an emergency, but not every feeling needs a reaction. Sometimes the most powerful move is to do nothing, to let the moment breathe, to give yourself just a few seconds of space, and in that space, everything changes. Your tone stabilizes, your thoughts organize, your presence returns, and suddenly you're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. So here's something simple to try. The next time you feel that internal surge, that urge to respond quickly, to defend, to prove, don't. Not immediately. Pause. 3 seconds. That's all. 3 seconds before you speak. It will feel unnatural at first, even uncomfortable. But that discomfort is a sign you're breaking a habit. Because most people can't tolerate silence under pressure. They rush to fill it, and that's exactly why they lose control. But when you learn to stay in that silence, even for a moment, you change how people experience you. You stop being reactive. You start being intentional. And that shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Because in the end, people don't remember how fast you responded. They remember how you made them feel when you did. And calm feels like control. Chapter 3. Silence is not empty. It's pressure. Most people are afraid of silence, not the peaceful kind, not the quiet you choose, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that shows up in the middle of a conversation, right after you say something, and no one responds immediately. That silence, the one that makes your chest tighten, the one that makes your brain whisper, say something, fill this. So you do. You add another sentence. You explain your point again. You soften what you just said. And without realizing it, you remove the weight your words could have carried. Because here's the truth most people never learn. Silence is not empty. Silence is pressure. And the moment you rush to fill it, you release that pressure before it has a chance to work for you. Think about it. When someone says something important and then stops, what happens? You lean in, even if just a little. Your mind starts working. You try to understand. You stay present. But when someone keeps talking, keeps adding, keeps explaining, you don't lean in, you lean out. Because there's no pressure to stay. Everything is already being given to you. Nothing is left for you to hold. I saw this clearly in a moment I didn't expect. It wasn't a meeting. It wasn't a presentation. It was a simple conversation between two friends. We were sitting at a small cafe late in the evening. Nothing formal, just talking about work, life, the usual things people circle around when they don't want to admit what's really on their mind. At one point, my friend said something quietly. "I don't think I'm happy doing this anymore." And then he stopped. No explanation, no justification, no attempt to soften it, just silence. At first it felt uncomfortable. There was this space in the air that didn't know where to go. My instinct was to respond quickly, to say something supportive, to fill the gap so it didn't feel awkward. But something about the way he said it made me wait. And in that waiting, something shifted. That single sentence started to grow. Not because he added more words, but because the silence gave it room. I started thinking about what he meant, what he wasn't saying, how long he must have been holding that in. That one sentence carried more weight than anything he could have explained. Because he didn't dilute it, he let it land. That's what silence does. It gives your words time to settle inside someone else's mind. But most people don't trust it. They think silence means they're losing control. That if they don't keep talking, the moment will fall apart. So they fill it. And in doing that, they remove the very thing that creates impact. Silence doesn't weaken your message. It forces people to engage with it. And that's where the real shift happens. Because communication is not just about what you say. It's about what the other person does with what you say. If you give them no space, they do nothing. If you give them space, they start to think. And thinking is what creates attention. There's a reason powerful speakers don't rush. It's not because they have less to say. It's because they understand something most people ignore. The pause is part of the message. I saw this again in a completely different setting. A team meeting, fast-paced, high energy, everyone trying to move quickly. Ideas were being thrown around. People were speaking over each other, interrupting, building, competing for space. In the middle of that noise, one person finally got a chance to speak. He made a point. Short, clear, and then he stopped. No follow-up. No extra explanation. Just silence. For a second, nothing happened. Then something subtle changed. The room didn't move on. It stayed. Someone looked at him, waiting. Another person leaned forward slightly. The conversation slowed down, without anyone saying slow down. And then someone asked, "Can you say that again?" That's when you know it landed. Not when people nod quickly, not when they say, yeah, but when they ask you to repeat it. Because silence didn't let them escape it. It held them there. Most people think talking more gives them control, but control doesn't come from filling space. It comes from owning it, and silence is how you do that. But here's the twist. Silence only works if you can hold it. Not for a long time, just long enough. Long enough for it to feel slightly uncomfortable. Long enough for the other person to stay in the moment. Most people break before that point. They speak too soon. They interrupt their own impact. Because the discomfort of silence feels like failure. But it's not. It's tension. And tension is what makes people pay attention. The next time you speak, try something different. Say what you need to say, clearly, directly. Then stop. Don't look down. Don't rush to add more. Just stay there. Let the silence exist. At first, it will feel wrong. Your mind will tell you that you need to fix it. But don't. Stay. Because in that moment, something important is happening. The other person is thinking, processing, engaging, deciding how to respond. And for once, they're not waiting for you to finish. They're already with you. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just support your words. It gives them weight. And when your words have weight, you don't need more of them. Chapter 4. You're not talking to be clear. You're talking to be enough. Most people don't talk to communicate. They talk to prove. Prove they're smart enough. Prove they belong in the room. Prove they deserve to be taken seriously. And the moment that need shows up, everything changes. Your tone shifts. Your pace speeds up. Your sentences get longer, not because you have more to say, but because you feel like what you've already said isn't enough. So you add more. Another example, another explanation, another layer of reasoning, just in case, just to make sure, just so no one can question you. But here's the truth most people never realize. The more you try to prove your value, the less people feel it. Because confidence doesn't explain itself. It shows up, and then it stops. Think about the last time you were in a conversation where someone kept going. They made a point, then they explained it again, then they added more detail. At some point, something in you checked out, not because you didn't understand, but because you already did. And everything after that felt unnecessary. That's the moment where communication stops and performance begins. I saw this play out in a way that changed how I listened to people completely. A friend of mine, Kevin, was one of the most capable people I knew. Sharp thinker, hard worker, the kind of person who always had something valuable to say. But in group settings, especially around people he respected, something shifted. He didn't just share his ideas. He tried to defend them before anyone even challenged him. He would start with a good point, then immediately follow it with reasons why it made sense, then examples, then possible objections, and his responses to them. All in one go. It was like he was having the entire conversation by himself. And the strange part, no one was actually questioning him, but you could feel it. He was trying to protect his idea from a reaction that hadn't even happened yet. And because of that, something felt off. People listened at first. Then they started waiting for him to finish, waiting for a gap, waiting for their turn. Not because they disagreed, but because he left no space for them to engage. One day, after a meeting, I asked him something simple. "Why do you explain so much?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said something honest. "I just don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about." That's when it clicked. He wasn't trying to communicate. He was trying to feel enough. And that's what most people are doing when they overtalk. They're not adding value. They're managing insecurity. But here's the problem. Insecurity doesn't hide itself in communication. It leaks. It shows up in your pacing, in your tone, in how much you feel the need to keep going. And people feel it, even if they can't explain it. That's why someone can say less and feel stronger, and someone else can say more and feel weaker. It's not about the content, it's about the energy behind it. Kevin didn't realize this at first, but something shifted a few weeks later. In another meeting, he had the chance to speak again. Same room, same people, but this time, something was different. He made a point. Short, direct. Then he stopped. No follow-up, no built-in defense, no second wave of explanation, just one clear statement. And then, silence. You could feel the difference immediately. People didn't jump in to replace him. They leaned in to understand him. Someone asked a question. Another person added a perspective. The conversation didn't move past him. It moved through him. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just present. That's the shift. You don't need to prove your value in a conversation. You need to trust that it's already there. Because the moment you start proving, you stop leading. Here's the twist most people don't expect. Over-explaining is not clarity. It's self-protection. You're not making your idea stronger. You're making yourself feel safer. But communication isn't about safety. It's about movement. If your words don't move people, they don't matter. Not because they're wrong, but because they don't go anywhere. Strong communication creates action. Weak communication creates noise. And the difference is simple. One trusts the idea, the other tries to defend it. So the next time you speak, ask yourself something honest. Am I saying this to help them understand or to make myself feel more secure? That question changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't go back to speaking the same way. You start noticing the extra sentences, the unnecessary explanations, the moments where you're talking just to fill a gap in your own confidence. And that's where real control begins. Not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. There's a moment in every conversation where you reach the point, where your idea is already clear, where the message has landed. And then there's a choice. Keep going or stop. Most people keep going because stopping feels like risk. What if they didn't understand? What if it wasn't enough? What if they judge me? So they add more, and in doing that, they weaken everything they just said. Because power doesn't come from volume, it comes from precision. Say what matters, then let it stand. Let people react, let them question, let them engage. Because that's where real communication begins. Not when you're speaking, but when they are. The next time you find yourself explaining, pause for a second. Ask yourself, have I already said enough? If the answer is yes, stop. Even if it feels early, even if it feels uncomfortable. Especially then, because that's the moment where most people lose their impact, and the few who don't become the ones everyone listens to. Chapter 5. The words that quietly kill your authority. There are conversations you lose long before they're over. Not because your idea was wrong, not because you lacked knowledge, not because the other person was stronger, but because of a few small words you didn't even notice you were using. Words that sound harmless, words that feel polite, words that most people use every day without thinking. And yet, those words quietly strip your message of its weight. They soften your point before it even lands. They introduce doubt before anyone has a chance to trust you. They make your ideas feel optional, even when they're right. You've heard them before. I think, maybe we could. I'm not sure, but this might not be right. But on the surface, they seem reasonable, even respectful. But underneath, they carry a hidden signal. I don't fully stand behind what I'm about to say. And people pick up on that signal instantly. Not consciously, not logically, but emotionally. Because communication is not just about the content of your words, it's about the certainty behind them. And certainty is fragile. It doesn't survive hesitation. I learned this in a way that was almost embarrassing. There was a time when I was presenting an idea to a small group. Nothing high stakes, nothing dramatic. Just a discussion about how to improve a process that clearly wasn't working. I'd thought it through. I knew where the problems were. I even had a clear solution in mind. But when I started speaking, something strange happened. I think we could maybe try adjusting this part, I said. And the moment those words left my mouth, I felt it. A subtle shift. No one challenged me, no one pushed back, but no one leaned in either. The conversation stayed flat. Someone nodded politely. Another person added a vague comment. Then the discussion drifted somewhere else. My idea didn't fail. It just never fully existed. Later, someone else brought up almost the same idea, but they said it differently. We should change this part, they said. It's slowing everything down. Same idea, different energy. And this time, the room responded. People engaged. They asked questions. They built on it. That was the moment it clicked for me. It wasn't the idea that changed. It was the certainty. That's when I started noticing something I'd never paid attention to before. the words people use when they're unsure, even when they're right. And once you see it, you start hearing it everywhere, in meetings, in conversations, even in yourself. I guess we could. Maybe it's just me, but I'm not an expert, but every one of those phrases does the same thing. It weakens your position before anyone else has the chance to challenge it. It's like starting a race by stepping backward. And here's the twist most people don't expect. People don't trust you more when you sound softer. They trust you less. Because confidence doesn't feel aggressive. It feels stable. And stability is what people look for when they decide whether to listen to you or not. But this doesn't mean you need to become louder, or more forceful, or aggressive. That's not authority. That's compensation. Real authority is quieter than that. It doesn't push. It doesn't rush. It simply stands. And the words you choose either support that or weaken it. I saw this play out clearly in someone I used to work with named Sarah. Sarah wasn't the most experienced person in the room. She wasn't the most senior. But when she spoke, people listened. Not because she said more, but because she said it differently. She didn't use filler phrases. She didn't soften her statements unnecessarily. When she had a point, she made it directly, not harshly, not aggressively, just clearly. In one meeting, someone asked for ideas on how to improve a process that had been slowing the team down for weeks. People started sharing. I think we could maybe look into. Not sure if this would work, but just throwing this out there. You could feel the uncertainty in the room. Ideas were being offered, but not owned. Then Sarah spoke. This step is the problem. It's creating delays. We should remove it and test a faster version this week. That was it. No long explanation, no hesitation, and something shifted. The conversation anchored around her point. People didn't question her confidence. They responded to it. They asked how to implement it. They discussed the risks. They moved forward. And what stood out wasn't just what she said. It was what she didn't say. She didn't apologize for her idea. She didn't soften it. She didn't try to protect herself from being wrong. She simply put it on the table and trusted it to stand. That's the difference. Weak words try to protect you. Strong words position you, and protection feels safe, but it costs you authority. Most people use weak language for one reason. They're trying to avoid being judged. They think if they soften their message, they'll be safer if they're wrong. But what they don't realize is this. By trying to avoid judgment, they guarantee they won't be taken seriously. Because people don't follow hesitation. They follow clarity. And clarity doesn't come from saying more. It comes from removing what doesn't belong. So here's something simple to start with. Pay attention to the first few words of your sentence. That's where most of the damage happens. I think, maybe, I guess. Try removing them, not replacing them. Removing them. Instead of saying, I think we should try a different approach. Say, we should try a different approach. Same idea. Different impact. Or instead of, maybe we could look at this option. Say, let's look at this option. You're not changing your intelligence. You're changing how it's received. And that changes everything. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. Like you're being too direct. Like you're exposing yourself. That's normal, because you're removing the safety net you've been using. But here's what you'll start to notice. People listen differently. They respond faster. They engage more seriously. Because your words no longer sound optional. They sound intentional. And intention is what creates trust. You don't need to eliminate all uncertainty. You don't need to pretend you're always right. But you do need to stop weakening your message before it even arrives. Say what you mean. Stand behind it. And let people respond. Because authority doesn't come from having perfect ideas. It comes from presenting them without hesitation. And once you learn to do that, you stop being the person who gets overlooked. You become the person people listen to the moment you speak. Chapter 6. Your voice is felt before it is heard. Most people believe communication starts with words. They focus on what to say, how to say it, which phrases sound better. They rehearse sentences in their head. They organize their thoughts. They try to sound clear, logical, structured, and yet something still feels off. They speak. People listen briefly. Then the connection fades. Not because the words were wrong, but because something deeper didn't land. Here's the part most people miss. People don't hear your words first. They feel your presence first. Before they process what you're saying, they're already reacting to how you're saying it. Your tone, your pacing, your energy, all of it sends a signal, and that signal shapes how your message is received, long before your message is understood. You've experienced this, even if you didn't notice it at the time. Think about someone who speaks with tension in their voice. Maybe they're rushing. Maybe their tone is slightly higher than usual. Maybe their words come out quickly, almost stacked on top of each other, even if what they're saying makes sense. It feels unstable. You don't fully trust it, not because of the idea, but because of the way it's delivered. Now think about the opposite. Someone speaks slowly. Their tone is steady. They don't rush to fill space. Even simple words sound stronger, more grounded, more certain, more believable. That's not about vocabulary. That's about energy. And energy is what people respond to first. I didn't fully understand this until I watched it play out in a situation that had nothing to do with presentations or meetings. It was a conversation between two people on my team. One of them had made a mistake, a costly one, the kind that puts pressure on everyone involved. When it came time to address it, I expected tension, I expected defensiveness, excuses, maybe even conflict. Instead, something else happened. The manager walked into the room, sat down, and spoke in a calm, even tone. Not cold, not distant, just steady. "We need to talk about what happened," he said. No raised voice, no emotional edge, just clarity. The person who made the mistake started explaining immediately. You could hear the anxiety in their voice. The pace, the slight panic, the need to justify. But the manager didn't match that energy. He didn't interrupt. He didn't escalate. He just listened. And when he responded, his tone stayed the same. Measured, controlled. "You don't need to explain everything right now," he said. "Let's focus on what we can fix." That one sentence changed the entire dynamic. The tension dropped. The conversation slowed down. The panic disappeared. Not because the problem was solved, but because the energy had been regulated. That's when it became clear. The manager didn't control the situation with authority. He controlled it with tone. And that's the twist most people don't expect. You don't control a room by speaking louder. You control it by staying grounded when others are not. Because when your tone is steady, it becomes the reference point. People adjust to it. They mirror it. And without realizing it, they start moving at your pace. But most people do the opposite. They match the energy around them. If the room is tense, they become tense. If someone speaks fast, they speak faster. If emotions rise, they react. And in doing that, they lose control. Because now, they're not leading the conversation, they're being led by it. That's why tone matters more than people think. It's not just how you sound. It's how you position yourself in the interaction. Are you reacting, or are you setting the pace? I saw this difference again in a smaller, quieter moment. A friend of mine was negotiating something important. Not a big corporate deal, just a personal situation that mattered to him. The other person was pushing hard, talking fast, trying to create pressure. You could feel the urgency in the air. Most people in that situation would respond the same way. they would speed up, talk more, try to keep up. But he didn't. He slowed down. He listened fully before responding. He took a breath before speaking, and when he did speak, his tone was calm, not defensive, not aggressive, just clear. "I understand what you're asking," he said, "but that doesn't work for me." No long explanation, no emotional reaction, just a steady statement, and something shifted immediately. The pressure broke. The other person slowed down. The conversation reset. Not because he had a stronger argument, but because he refused to match the urgency. He stayed grounded. And that grounded energy became the new center of the conversation. That's what tone does. It doesn't just carry your words, it shapes the entire interaction. But here's the part that matters most. You can't fake tone. You can't just sound calm while feeling reactive inside. People pick up on that instantly. The tension leaks through. In your pacing, in your breath, in the way your voice slightly tightens. That's why tone is not something you perform. It's something you build through awareness, through practice, through learning how to stay steady, even when you feel the pull to react. So the next time you're in a conversation, don't just focus on what you're saying. Pay attention to how you're saying it. Are you rushing? Are you filling space too quickly? Are you reacting to the energy around you? Or are you setting your own pace? Try something simple. Slow down your speech by just a small amount. Not dramatically, just enough to feel the difference. Add a brief pause before you respond. Let your voice drop slightly at the end of your sentence. Not as a technique, but as a way to stay grounded. At first, it will feel unnatural, like you're doing less than you should. But that's exactly the point. Because when you do less, people feel more. They hear you more clearly. They trust your words more easily. They stay with you longer. Not because you said something extraordinary, but because you delivered it in a way that felt stable. And stability is what people follow. In the end, your words matter, but not as much as you think. Because before people decide what they think about your idea, they've already decided how they feel about you. And that decision happens in your tone. Chapter 7. The moment you react, you lose control. There is a moment in every conversation that decides everything. It's not when you start speaking. It's not when you make your point. It's the moment something triggers you. A comment that feels dismissive. A tone that feels disrespectful. A question that sounds like a challenge. And in that split second, something shifts inside you. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your focus narrows. You stop listening. You start preparing. What to say next. How to defend yourself. How to regain control. And without realizing it, you've already lost it. Because the moment you react, you are no longer choosing, you are following the emotion, following the pressure, following the other person's energy. And once you're following, you're not leading the conversation anymore. Most people don't notice this happening. They think they're responding, but they're not. They're reacting. And there's a difference. A response is intentional. A reaction is automatic. A response creates space. A reaction fills it. A response keeps control. A reaction gives it away. I didn't fully understand this until I saw it happen in a situation that felt almost ordinary at first. Two colleagues were discussing a project that had gone wrong. Nothing unusual, just a conversation that needed to happen. At the beginning, it was calm. They exchanged ideas. They reviewed what had happened. Then one comment shifted everything. "You should have caught that earlier." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't aggressive. But it landed with weight. You could feel it. The other person paused. Just for a second. And in that second, there was a choice. Respond or react. He reacted. Immediately. That's not fair. You didn't have all the information either." His tone changed. His pace increased. His words came faster. And just like that, the conversation was no longer about the problem. It became about defending positions, proving points, protecting egos. The original issue disappeared. What replaced it was tension. And once tension takes over, clarity leaves. I watched the entire dynamic change in less than a minute. Not because of what was said, but because of how it was handled. Later, I saw the same situation play out in a completely different way. Different people, same kind of tension. A mistake had been made. A comment was thrown out, sharp enough to trigger a reaction. "You missed that. That's on you." Again, there was a pause. That moment. The same moment that decides everything. But this time, the response was different. The person didn't speak immediately. They let the comment sit. You could see the reaction building, but you could also see them holding it. Then they said calmly, "Maybe, let's walk through it." That was it. No defense, no pushback, no escalation. And something changed instantly. The tension had nowhere to go, because it wasn't being fed. The conversation didn't spiral, it stabilized. They went back to the issue. They stayed on track. And what could have turned into conflict became progress. That's when it became clear. Control in a conversation is not about saying the right thing. It's about not saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And most of the wrong things we say come from reaction, not intention. Here's the twist most people don't expect. Your first instinct is almost never your best response. It's just your fastest one. It's built from habit, from past experiences, from the need to protect yourself. And if you follow it every time, you become predictable in the worst way. Reactive, defensive, easy to pull off balance. But when you interrupt that instinct, even briefly, you create space. And in that space, you regain control. Because now you're choosing not just what to say, but whether to say anything at all. Most people treat every comment like it requires a response. Like silence means weakness. Like not answering immediately means losing. But sometimes, the strongest move is not to engage at the same level. Not to match the tone, not to follow the emotion, to step outside of it. Because when you don't react, you break the pattern. And once the pattern is broken, the dynamic changes. I remember a moment that made this impossible to ignore. A friend of mine was dealing with a difficult client. The kind that pushes, the kind that tests boundaries, the kind that tries to create urgency where there is none. At one point, the client said something sharp. "This delay is unacceptable. You're wasting our time." There it was, the trigger. Most people, in that moment, would react, explain, defend, push back. But he didn't. He paused, just long enough for the tension to settle. Then he said, "I understand why it feels that way." And he stopped. No justification, no argument, just acknowledgement. The client continued, but the tone had already softened. The pressure wasn't gone, but it had changed. And from that point on, the conversation moved differently. Not because he won, but because he didn't lose control. That's the difference. You don't need to dominate a conversation to lead it. You just need to stay in control of yourself when others aren't. So here's something to practice. The next time you feel triggered, and you will, notice it. Don't ignore it. Don't suppress it. Just notice it. The tightening, the urge to respond immediately, the need to say something, anything, and then do something most people never do. Wait, not long, just a few seconds. Let the reaction pass through you without acting on it, and then choose. Choose your words, choose your tone, choose your timing. Because that's where real power lives, not in having the perfect response, but in not being controlled by your first one. In the end, People won't remember every word you said, but they will remember how you handled pressure, how you responded when things got uncomfortable, how you showed up when it mattered. And if you can stay steady in those moments, you won't just be heard, you'll be respected. Chapter 8. You don't need to speak better. You need to become someone. People. Wait for most people. Think communication is a skill you use, something you turn on when you need it, something you improve with tips, techniques, better wording. So they practice what to say. They learn how to structure sentences. They try to sound more confident, more clear, more persuasive. And for a while, it works. They get better at expressing ideas, better at explaining, better at sounding composed. But something still feels missing, because the real shift doesn't happen when you learn how to speak. It happens when people start waiting for you to speak. That's different. That's not a skill. That's an identity. And most people never make that shift. They stay in the mindset of trying to be heard, trying to earn attention in every conversation, trying to prove their value every time they open their mouth. But the people who actually hold attention don't try that hard. They don't chase it. They don't fight for it. They become someone people naturally listen to. And here's the part that most people don't expect. That doesn't happen because of one great conversation. It happens because of consistency over time, because people are always watching, not in an obvious way, not in a dramatic way, but in small moments. They notice how often you speak, how often you interrupt, how often you repeat yourself. They notice whether your words match your behavior, whether your tone stays steady, whether your presence changes under pressure. And over time, they build a pattern, a quiet expectation of what you're like. If you speak often, they expect noise. If you speak emotionally, they expect reaction. If you explain too much, they expect you to keep going. But if you speak rarely and clearly, something else happens. They start to wait, because now, when you speak, it means something. It signals intention. It signals that what you're about to say is worth listening to. I saw this in someone who barely spoke at all. His name was Michael. He wasn't the most senior person in the room. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't try to lead conversations. Most of the time, he just listened. Not passively, not disengaged, but fully present. He followed the discussion. He paid attention to the details. He didn't interrupt or compete for space. At first, people didn't think much of it. They assumed he was quiet, maybe even unsure. But over time, something changed. Because when Michael did speak, it was different. He didn't jump in early. He didn't add to the noise. He waited. And when he finally said something, it was always precise, clear, focused, relevant. No extra words, no unnecessary explanation, just the point. And then, silence. He didn't defend it. He didn't repeat it. He let it stand. At first, it felt unusual. But then something interesting started happening. People began to notice. In meetings, when a topic became complicated or unclear, someone would eventually say, "Let's hear what Michael thinks." Not because he asked for it, not because he positioned himself as an expert, but because over time he had built something rare: trust in his presence. People knew that if he spoke, it mattered. And that trust wasn't built in a single moment. It was built in every moment where he chose not to speak unnecessarily. Every time he held back instead of adding noise. Every time he listened instead of reacting. Every time he spoke with intention instead of impulse. That's the part most people don't see. Authority is not created when you speak. It's created in all the moments you don't. Here's the twist that changes everything. You don't earn respect by speaking well in one conversation. You earn it by being consistent across all of them. Because people don't judge you based on one interaction. They judge you based on patterns. And patterns take time. That's why quick fixes don't last. You can learn to pause. You can learn to slow down. You can learn to remove weak words. But if you only apply those things occasionally, they don't become part of how people experience you. They become exceptions. And exceptions don't change perception. Consistency does. So if you want to become someone people listen to, you have to think differently. Not, how do I sound better right now? But, what pattern am I creating over time? Are you someone who fills every silence? Or someone who allows space? Are you someone who reacts quickly? Or someone who responds intentionally? Are you someone who speaks often? Or someone who speaks when it matters? Every choice you make adds to that pattern. And over time, that pattern becomes your identity. That's why some people don't need to say much to be heard, because people have already decided that when they speak, it's worth listening to. You don't have to fight for attention when that happens. You don't have to prove anything. You just show up and speak, and the room adjusts. So here's where this all comes together. You've learned how to say less, how to stay calm, how to use silence, how to choose your words, how to control your tone, how to avoid reacting. But none of that matters if it's not consistent, because communication is not a performance. It's a reflection of who you are. And people don't follow performances. They follow patterns they trust. So the next time you're in a conversation, don't think about impressing anyone. Don't think about saying the perfect thing. Think about something simpler. Does this need to be said? And if it does, say it clearly. Then stop. Let it land. Let people respond, and let your presence do the rest. Because in the end, you don't need more words. You don't need better sentences. You need to become someone whose silence already speaks. You've made it all the way here, and if you've been paying attention, something should feel different already. Not because you learned a trick, not because you memorized a few techniques, but because you've started to see communication in a completely different way. This was never about speaking more clearly. It was never about having better words. It was about something deeper. Control. Control over when you speak. Control over how you respond. Control over the space you create when you don't say anything at all. Let's bring it all together. You saw that talking more doesn't make you more understood. In fact, it often does the opposite. The moment you become predictable, people stop listening. You learned that calm is not something you're born with. It's something you build. Because when you control your emotional state, you control how people experience you. You saw the power of silence, not as emptiness, but as pressure. The kind of pressure that makes people stay present, think deeper, and actually engage with what you say. You understood that over-explaining is not clarity. It's often insecurity trying to protect itself. And the more you try to prove your value, the less people feel it. You saw how small words you probably use every day, can quietly weaken your message before it even lands, and how removing them can instantly change how people respond to you. You realized that your tone speaks before your words ever do, that people feel your presence before they understand your message. You saw how reacting gives away your power, and how a simple pause can bring it back. And finally, you saw the biggest shift of all. This is not about becoming a better speaker. It's about becoming someone people trust to listen to. Someone whose words carry weight, because they don't waste them. But here's the truth. None of this works if you don't practice it. Not once, not just in the next conversation, but consistently. Because this is not a skill you use occasionally. It's a way you show up. So don't try to change everything at once. Start simple. In your next conversation, say a little less than you normally would. Pause before you respond. Remove one weak phrase. Let one silence exist without filling it. That's enough. Because small changes, repeated consistently, become patterns, and patterns become identity. And identity is what people respond to, not what you say once, but who you become over time. If this message connected with you, there's a good chance you're not the only one who needs to hear it. We all know someone who keeps trying, keeps speaking, but still feels unheard. Someone who has something valuable to say, but hasn't learned how to make it land. Share this video with them. It might not just help them communicate better. It might change how they show up in every room they walk into. Thank you for staying all the way through. I'll see you in the next video.